Welcome to the October 30th episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in our lives. I am your host, OldManStompy, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And Dracologist. Good evening.
So, welcome back, Dracologist. Lotus Prince, you're always here. I am also new.
I am very much, how to say this, quick again to return to this. We lost twice somewhere in the void of space, time and space, so I have to slip in.
Yeah, he won't be coming back.
Yeah, he's gone.
Like he's the bolt. He comes back. Trust me.
Right. It's like a boomerang.
So
we have a couple of interesting topics this week. One of them is very near and dear to my heart, which is, of course, the PlayStation 1. I played it a lot when I was a kid. So recently the PS1 Classic, I think it was actually today, they announced the full lineup for both the North American and the PAL and Japanese releases. I think it's the North American and PAL region get one list of games.
Yeah, and Japan gets the other.
There's 12 common games, and then each region or set of regions gets another 8 specific games tailored to that area.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like I have the lists here. So like America, for example, or like the West, got Battle Arena Toshinden, Cool Borders 2, Destruction Derby, Final Fantasy VII, Grand Theft Auto, Intelligent Cube, Q-U-B-E Cube, Jumping Flash, Metal Gear Solid, Mr. Driller, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, the first one, Rayman, Resident Evil The Director's Cut, Revelations Persona, so I believe that's Persona 1,
Yep.
Ridge Racer Type 4, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, I know Perry would love that, Siphon Filter, Tekken 3, which is probably the best PS1 Tekken game, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, Twisted Metal, and Wild Arms. That's quite an eclectic assortment there.
That's a good broad the first line, actually.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned Perry, because like literally nobody has any idea why that's relevant to this conversation.
I mean, what can I say? He loves him some Puzzle Fighter. But as for exclusives, yeah, the West got Cool Borders 2, Destruction Derby, GTA, Oddworld, Rayman, Siphon Filter, Rainbow Six, and Twisted Metal, whereas Japan's exclusives were Arc the Lad 1 and 2, Armored Core, Gradius Gaiden, Psy, like XI, Psy, Saga Frontier, G Darius, and Parasite Eve. So Japan went with the more RPG route.
Mm-hmm. I'm really curious if Arc the Lad 1 has the save carry over to Arc the Lad 2, because like Arc the Lad 1 by itself is just not a very interesting game at all.
Actually, what I'm interested in is if Japan got like Persona 1 had some cut content in America. So I wonder if there's different Persona 1s on each PS1, or if the PS1 Classic is going to pull like a Super Nintendo Classic and release like uncut PS1 to the West. That'd be pretty amazing.
Well, so Persona 1, it already has a re-release on the PSP that has the content restored.
Yes.
So if they really wanted to, they could just they could add that back in and use the translation that they used for the PSP version.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked that deep into which version they're going to use.
Yeah,
it makes sense to use the full version because it's not like this was 20 years ago, right? There's no reason for them to keep it from us.
The only other thing I was curious about is Resident Evil: The Director's Cut. I suspect we're going to get the first Director's Cut for 2 reasons. One, the PS1 Classic does not have sticks. It doesn't have the DualShock thing, and the original Resident Evil's Director's Cut did not have DualShock support, and the one that did, the DualShock support release of the Director's Cut, had the infamously bad soundtrack, but Europe never got that. So I suspect we're getting OG Director's Cut with the classic background music.
Well, what I hope is that it's like a slightly different version than all of the other versions of the Resident Evil.
I have to redo my entire video.
In some subtle way that causes you to throw out like 65 minutes of video that you've already recorded for your Resident Evil.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, yeah, like
Christ.
They have like a remastered version of the bad soundtrack. Every theme is the basement theme.
And the last track is, if you play it on Redbook Audio, it just says like "fuck you, Lotus Prince."
That'd be fantastic.
Honestly, the Resident Evil is one of the most time remade game I ever saw. Like, I never seen any like I seen sequels, but remade.
Well,
Resident Evil takes the cake.
Yeah, I guess it was remade. Yeah, I guess it had the director's cut, and then I don't know how much I would really count the DualShock version, except for the soundtrack. But like director's cut, HD remake, and HD remaster of the remake. That is pretty serious business. And the DS version has its own mode as well, so like it's kind of remade like 4 times. 5 if you'll take the DualShock release in America. That's a lot.
I mean, it's a good game to remake. For one, it's it's revolutionary, right? It's one of the first like major survival horror games.
Yeah.
It's so like the flaws of the game are easy to cover in modern gaming design, right? The only things that are really bad that don't age well about PS1 games are like awkward controls, because the DualShock didn't exist in the early days of the PS1, and the bad graphics. The graphics, of course, you can easily fix if you spend the time to upscale everything, and the controls are part of the game. You're supposed to feel like you're a little bit handcuffed trying to control.
I actually tried playing with the stick and it felt weird. Like I voluntarily went with the D-pad for that one, because like there is a degree of control that the D-pad offers that ironically the joystick doesn't. Like the joystick offers more control in a literal sense, but if I want to move in exactly one direction, then I'll take the D-pad.
So if you guys had the option, which of the two would you purchase? The North American PAL version or the Japanese version?
Japanese, no doubt.
Neither, because I'm not a PS Express person. I don't buy consoles.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, like I don't really care enough to purchase either one. But if I had to purchase one, Japanese version, just because it has a few more games that I'm interested in.
Which would be?
Well, I mean, this is easily available on PlayStation Network anyway. But Parasite Eve, I'm kind of just to try it. I kind of want to take a look at Armored Core. That'd be kind of amusing. Same goes for Wild Arms. I don't think I've ever... Or was Wild Arms an exclusive, or was that the Saga game? Whatever, but like...
Saga Frontier is the exclusive, yes.
It was the Saga... Okay, oh yeah, that's right, well, America got Wild Arms. Just to dabble in it, because like, America has more of a variety, but I just don't care about Siphon Filter or Twisted Metal. I know they're really good games, but they're not my thing.
I play Twisted Metal too, but it's really just... If you've ever known Unreal Tournament, it's the same, only with cards.
Like, I'm really only interested in just watching the cutscenes of the endings because they're weird and kind of creepy. Like, that's about it. I don't want to actually play the game.
For Siphon Filter was always a curious game. It's like almost like one of those like Tom Clancy games, like sort of this realistic agent shootout, is this sneaky stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's... Who are you? Like, Sam... somebody in Siphon Filter? Sam Fisher? Was that the guy?
Sam Fisher is the Tom Clancy game, no?
No, Sam Fisher is the name of the guy in Siphon Filter, is that right? Like, Solid Snake was Metal Gear Solid. I think Sam Fisher was... Oh, no, was Sam Fisher Spec Ops? No, that can't be right. Whatever. He was one of those, like, yeah, like you're saying, like, espionage spies. Oh, Splinter Cell.
Sam Fisher is Splinter Cell.
Oh, not Siphon Filter. Oh, okay. I blew it. Maybe you haven't guessed, but I haven't played Splinter Cell either.
So is there anything that looks like a really glaringly obvious omission, knowing that it was obviously difficult? I know that, Lotus, you had a rant about this earlier, that there are certain games that you shouldn't expect to be part of the PS1.
Yeah, I saw people...
You never know what they'll bother to negotiate the rights for.
Yeah, I saw people complaining, like, where's Xenogears? It's like, on PlayStation Network for like 10 years. Like where's Tony Hawk? Rights issues and licensing of music and likenesses out the ass. Where the hell do you think Tony Hawk is? But I would say for glaring omissions, probably Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and even more glaring is Tomb Raider. I can't believe they don't have Tomb Raider on there. I don't even care about playing it myself, but it's like really surprising that it's not there.
Well, I guess it's Konami's fault.
Tomb Raider is owned by...
Konami had Metal Gear Solid, though. Tomb Raider is owned by what?
Tomb Raider is owned by IDOS, which is Square Enix now, right?
Yeah, okay, but like Parasite Eve is in the Japanese thing, and Brave Fencer Musashi is out on both versions, I think. So, like, I have no idea. I mean, I guess Tomb Raider did kind of, like, it is kind of doing its own... Has it changed companies when we went to the remake?
For one, it's possible that the original Tomb Raider is just a non-entity now to the publisher because they've gone so far down the reboot path that they just aren't really interested.
Yeah, it's a trilogy of reboots. Yeah. Although you'd think that would be like a perfect opportunity to capitalize on that. Like, remember that game we made? Like, it's like Persona 3, 4, and 5 just killed. So it seems like a really good idea to be like, hey, did you know that there's an original Persona? You know, it would be like re-releasing Fallout 1 on PC. Like, did you know that there's a number before 3? Like, there is. So, I don't know. It seemed like it would be an interesting sort of nostalgia. I mean, the whole point of this console is nostalgia. You could buy half the stuff on PSN anyway, but it's just kind of cool to have it in a package.
Yeah, I wanted to say that that day's nostalgia, others are really, really plump right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's sort of why...
So the milking begins.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's sort of why I'm like not super excited about any of the classic systems. The Mega Drive Classic, the SNES. I mean, I own the SNES Classic just because I was so hyped for Star Fox 2, I couldn't resist it. Like,
well, that was the thing. Yeah, like I didn't care about the NES Classic because all those games are like a fucking $1. But Super Nintendo, those are really good games, and this is more of my position. Like I mean, we're an esoteric. Like, we're a group of people with esoteric like tastes and like game setups that not a lot of people have. Not a lot of people keep their fucking Sega Saturns around and stuff like that. But a lot of the Super Nintendo games you could easily get on the virtual store or even like buy the actual cartridge for if you still have your Super Nintendo. So I wasn't as concerned about that. But Star Fox 2, if you want to play it on a console, then that really is the way to do it. But the PS1 Classic doesn't have anything that I couldn't very easily get on my own anyway.
And that's true. If you were looking for an actual like physical house for the game that you could play on a television, obviously, of course, you can play it on PSN.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff you can emulate if you want to, but if you want to get that feel...
It's kind of hard to get a hold of a copy of Intelligent Cube, and it always was. That was a very low game.
True.
Same thing for Jumping Flash, Saga Frontier. These are not like... They're easy to get on PSN, which is great.
Speaking of... No, yes?
No, go ahead.
Just wanted to say, speaking of Intelligent Cube, like again, I think in the previous podcast I mentioned that the same developer made Philosoma, which is also a PS1.
You did mention that.
Nice.
But actually, as far as Tony Hawk is concerned, though, if you still have your PS3 lying around, buy Tony Hawk for like $5. Like, you don't even need a PS1 Classic. Just put it in your PS3. Just play it.
Mm-hmm.
Like these people are complaining about games that like they could have played this whole time, and it's such a shame that it's not released on this limited quantity classic console. It's like, I don't know, man. I mean, like, again, yeah, like you said, Jumping Flash is a bit harder to find. Intelligence Cube is a bit harder to find. So, like, you may as well get the stuff that you couldn't extremely easily get in any number of other ways for years.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What platform was on Hybrid Heaven was on?
Hybrid Heaven was the N64.
Yeah, N64.
Yeah. Although, actually, my favorite Twitter post about this whole thing was, like, an ironic complaint. They were like, damn you, Sony, how come you didn't put on, like, bracket, that obscure game that only my friends and I like? Like, it's like, yeah, I for one, kind of would have wanted Kingsfields, but I'm aware that nobody gives a shit about Kingsfields, so, like, of course it's not going to be on there.
So you remember when we did the Dream Smash Brothers podcast episode, and I told Vice that like Adol Christen's to be in Smash Brothers, and he was just like, "No, that's never going to happen."
Who is that?
And Adol Christen is the Ease guy.
Right. Well, they're putting everybody in. Who even knows anymore?
No, he's not going to be in. It's definitely not noteworthy enough over like Simon Belmont, like Bayonetta, Cloud Strife. Like, he is not on that tier.
Bayonetta is at least a Nintendo property now. Like, I really could not believe that they did Cloud Strife and brought Snake back. Like, that was a shot. And Simon, Ryu. Well, yeah, but they got the Capcom thing going on, so also Mega Man. Simon and Richter Belmont, like, Cloud and Simon were like the number 1 and 2 on every fan poll, and I'm like, guys, let's be realistic here. But they're actually in, so who even knows?
Right. Well, I mean, anyway, that's an episode of another podcast that we already did, and we'll probably do.
We already did. Yeah. Who do you think's going to be in Smash Double Ultimate, you guys?
Oh god.
That will be fun. Like, where are they going to go from here?
Yeah.
like you saw that little flash animation I showed you, Lotus.
I think so.
Like the one Doomslayer joins the Smash.
Oh yeah, Doom. Yeah, that I'm not gonna hold my breath for.
I mean, the interactions with Isabelle from Animal Crossing would be like pretty dire.
Now I'm radioactive.
Crunch.
That can't be good. Rip and tear, rip and tear. What?
Anyway, so that's like one really piece of big news from just like literally the day that we're recording this podcast. The other big one that's kind of like short is that they announced that 2B is appearing in Tekken 6.
No, yeah, that would make sense. Tekken, but no, Soul Calibur.
I'm sorry, Soul Calibur 6.
Yeah.
My mistake. You can tell how much I play fighting games.
Okay.
But yeah, Soul Calibur always had. Go ahead.
I seen a tweet about this, like butt and breast people are now really going to fight it out on this.
I mean, welcome to every woman in Soul Calibur already. But like the thing with Soul Calibur is they've always had a guest character, and Soul Calibur 4, they kind of had two, but they were both from the same franchise. They were promoting Star Wars Force Unleashed, so they had. They didn't even give him a name yet. Starkiller, he was called The Apprentice. And depending on which platform you had, PS3 had Darth Vader, and Xbox 360 had Yoda, and then they eventually allowed you to purchase the other character for DLC on each platform. And Soul Calibur 5, they didn't actually have Devil Jin, but they had a custom character that was Devil Jin modeled, which was kind of funny, and it was hilarious to play as him on day one, because you could eye laser and nobody fucking saw that coming, because who would? It was really, really funny. But the guest...
I don't know that reference, but...
Oh, yeah, well, no, Devil Jin from Tekken just straight up has eye lasers. So, like, people on day one...
Like, most of these fighting games, people are throwing fireballs on left up.
Yeah, but not Soul Calibur, though. That's why it was funny. Like, on day one, everyone's playing their regular characters, and you select the Devil Jin custom guy and just shoot him from across the screen. It was funny as hell.
Like,
Instant ring
that's
out.
a big deal, too, because, like, that's part of why Devil Jin is also so overpowered in Tekken, because they're both 3D brawlers that are, like, mostly focused on hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, there's very little projectile use. But, like, Soul Calibur 5's real guest character was Ezio from Assassin's Creed, and... The PSP game, I forgot what that was called. I want to say Chain of Memories, but it's freaking Kingdom Hearts. Like, what was that? Do you know the Soul Calibur PSP game?
I didn't even know we were talking about Soul Calibur today. I'm like the last person who should be asking this question.
But like, they had Kratos from God of War, and Soul Calibur 6. The big gimmick was Geralt from The Witcher.
Revia.
So you're like, okay, we got Geralt. There's the big guest character, but now they have another guest character, and it's from Nier Automata. Like,
So this is like almost Adol Kristen levels to me in terms of what we were talking about before. Like it's hard for me to imagine, having played the Drakengard saga all the way from the original game, that it's achieved such mainstream penetration.
Well, it really hasn't. Nier Automata has.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's the culmination of the series. Like, every game builds on the one that came before. Basically, they hired Platinum Games to take this insane story that Yoko Taro keeps pooping out.
Yeah.
And, like, actually make a really fun game around it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, technically they build on the games previously, but, like, you could do just fine playing Nier without looking up the online, like, translated Japanese book that explains what happened between Drakengard and Nier. It's like, all right.
We've said this before, right? Like, I watched a lore video on YouTube about what happened between, like, the end of Drakengard 3 or 2 and and what happened in
1 really. 2 was
between the end of 1 and, like, all the way through Nier, and they got through like 20 minutes of lore, and I had no idea what they were talking about.
I read a TLDR on Reddit, and that shit was insane. Mm-hmm. Like, I basically know what happened, and whoa, okay. But the thing with Automata, though, is that it's interesting because it takes place, like, thousands of years in the future. Like, I know that we've had people from present day show up in Soul Calibur, but this is very distant future. So it's just, that's just amusing to me. I still have to play Nier Automata, though, so I hope that, I don't know if anything would really be spoiled, but I'm just kind of holding out. One thing I thought was kind of funny, by the way, is they showed you, because 2B is a DLC character, they showed, like, the costume pack, and one of them is Kaine's costume from regular Nier. So I don't think that was a thing in Nier Automata, but it's a nice nod to the PS3 and Japanese only, or no, PS3 and 360 game Japan had its like another Nier game that America didn't get, but
oh yeah, the Gestalt and Replicant versions of Nier.
Yeah, I think America got. Oh Christ! Did we get Replicant?
I thought I know we got the one with the old guy, and
yes,
then
because
Japan got the one with the young
thing
guy.
is, like, I know what Gestalt and Replicant the words mean now in the context of Nier, so it's like it's weird to me. But yeah, it's just kind of funny to see 2B in a game, like in a fighting game. It just makes me think of Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 in Tekken 7. Yeah, I know you fight all the time with him. I just didn't think he'd be in a fighting game.
Yeah, that's what threw me off. The fact that Tekken 7 has like a whole bunch of crossover characters, and I sort of just like implanted Tekken in my brain when I thought about like melee fighters.
Yeah, it
that
makes
have crossover
sense.
characters.
Tekken 7 got really weird with those guest characters.
It's got Noctis. I mean, that's the weirdest one, but it's also
By
got
far.
like Geese
like-
Howard.
Yeah, Geese Howard is like probably my favorite addition.
Sorry, Dracologist.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say, like, at this point, like, these games are getting so engorged with like these guest characters and crossover characters that, and eventually the gravitational pull just going to agglomerize them into a single game.
I mean,
Yeah, it's called Super Smash Brothers.
Well, I mean, Disney's trying pretty
much.
hard, right? Like, technically, if they really wanted to, they could put. I mean, they've already done this in some of their like Disney Infinity games, but they have like the Avengers, Star Wars, and all of the classic Disney characters. Like, that's a pretty big gravitational pull.
Yeah,
And like
Kingdom Hearts 3 is going to be that void where it all comes together.
It's a big like investor thing. People are trying to think about where Disney can go next, and like Mario is a really popular rumor.
Yeah, actually, by the way, speaking of Kingdom Hearts, like this is going way back to Kingdom Hearts 2, but like there are certain things that you kind of forgot were Disney. Like, do you know how weird it was to see, like, you know how in Mario Odyssey when you go to New Donk City, you see Mario next to like normally proportioned people, and you're like, oh, like that's weird. Like Kingdom Hearts 2 had like Pirates of the Caribbean and Tron, so just normal ass human beings walking around, and you're like, that was a thing. Yeah, it's just so weird to see.
Can you imagine like the Black Cauldron in Kingdom Hearts? Like,
that would be actually amazing because like I never saw the movie. I heard it wasn't good, but that was a solid book series. It really was.
Sure. I just only know about the animation. The books I never heard about.
Yeah, the books are solid. They really are. Starring Taran, the assistant pig keeper. It really is kind of like The Hobbit. He's just some dude who gets into this progressively bigger adventure.
There was a what I wanted to say, that there was a King's Quest style game for Black Cauldron, I think.
I think I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. But that's kind of cool.
But anyway, it's in that vein, right? Disney owns so many properties that if they just sort of plop somebody into a Kingdom Hearts game or even a Disney movie, like it would be totally normal. You'd be like, "Whoa! I can't believe this is free! Like this can happen
Yeah.
at any time."
I'm just not sure that the character you really want to be in Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, it just kind of reminded me of like Adult Swim when they started just fucking around with C-Lab 2020 and they made like 2021, or like incorporating Johnny Quest into the Venture Brothers. It's like, oh yeah, they can just do that.
That was complicated too, right? Because they couldn't at the start. He was Action Johnny. They could use Race Bannon, but not Johnny Quest for some reason. I forget
that's
why.
what it was.
And then like later he became Johnny Quest, I think.
Oh man, like because like one of the like in the latest season, one of the Venture Brothers episodes had an episode. There was an episode where a bunch of the villains were getting together to do one last revenge match against their individual nemeses, and like I didn't know he was from anything, but they're like the old like Chinese doctor was apparently some kind of Johnny Quest villain, and it actually goes like, oh, I remember my enemy, like who was Johnny's father. He didn't really have anything against like a 10-year-old kid, but it just shows like old school Johnny Quest just finding weird archaeological items and like hiding from the bad guy. It was so fucking weird. So when he like finally runs into Johnny Quest in his like therapy center because he's like become some sort of drug addict, like you see him just kind of going like, so yeah, remember those times? Like, you want me to just run and hide somewhere? The doctor's like, yes, that'd be great. Like, it was just so weird.
I mean, let's remember. So when I said Race Bannon was in it, like in the first season of Venture Brothers, he fucking dies. Like
I actually don't remember that. That's amazing.
So like it represents the death of the kind of like innocence that era inspired that kind of science fiction.
Yeah, but before the new Johnny Quest thing, the only Johnny Quest stuff I remember from old Venture Brothers was the giant walking eye that was, like, apparently in an old Johnny Quest episode. And at one point, because I think it was always in the opening credits, so at one point someone just asks Dr. Venture, what the hell is that thing and what does it do? And he's like, it's cool. It's a walking eye. Like, that's really all there is to it. Like, I don't know what...
They went way beyond that, right? Because, like, he, like, starts doing, like, a car wash, like a sexy car wash on the walking eye because it's so, like, iconic.
Yeah.
He's, like, everybody's jealous of his walking eye.
Well, yeah, even if you never watched Johnny Quest, you're like, I kind of remember that walking eye. It was the credits.
Wasn't it blown up?
It might have been. But, yeah,
I mean,
it's just like a weird piece of history that Cartoon Network can actually use. It's like, all right, we'll do this.
And they allow Adult Swim to do it, technically a separate legal entity for
it's a separate, but it's just amazing. I love it.
I don't like the Robot Chicken type of humor, but okay.
Yeah, that's not so much my thing, but Venture Brothers is also Adult Swim, and it's freaking gold.
Adult Swim is definitely real hit or miss. I appreciate that they're experimental. So that means that I won't like everything that they do, but I appreciate that they try.
Yeah.
You know, they made another short. The same people who made the unedited footage of a bear, they have a new short that came out like 1 or 2 years ago. You should go look at it. Yeah.
Was that the one with the people like melting into the floor?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, also creepy.
What is it called?
I don't remember.
This house is full of people, I think it's called.
That sounds right, yeah. I just remember Too Many Cooks was kind of creepy but fascinating. The House is Full of People, I don't think I actually watched from beginning to end, but I saw that it could be disturbing. But unedited footage of a bear, like, actually legitimately, like, just creep me out for like days. I was afraid to, like, go to, like, my friend's house at night. I was just, like, uneasy for days. The video creeped me the fuck out.
That's like saying something because, like, you made your bread and butter on YouTube doing horror games, like, in the middle of the night in your basement. Basically,
well, the first horror game to ever make me straight up nervous at night was Fatal Frame 1. Now I play it again. When I finally LP'd it, I was like, oh, it's not so bad. But, like, unedited footage of the bear scared the shit out of me. Like, oh, man, that is not an easy save.
Actually, and did you know what the video was about? Like, did you find the hidden meaning?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not going to go into that here because there's lengthy discussions of it. I do know what it's about,
like,
but, like,
you can sum it up in a few words, but it's but yeah,
kids don't do drugs.
No, not prescribed. What do you call it? Antidepressants.
Right.
Like, don't abuse them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they may actually made two. Like, there is one called Children of the Mirror, which is where it kind of blows off its load a little bit early. Like, well, not early, but it makes a suggestion that makes it very, very simple to identify what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
There is one of the actors who part of this group is made the Ellen tutorial, and the last one was Cry of Man, like man with 2 N, which was actually a live theater sort of.
That's gotta be weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an interactive drama, and it was very great. There is a channel called Nightmind. Look it up. The guy with very soft voice explains every event and interpretation.
Nice.
It's fun.
Nice. I'm pretty excited about that, actually. Like, obviously, I only knew about these two, but I don't expect that the actors just sat around doing nothing in between making these two Adult Swim, like, infomercials.
Yeah. That unedited footage of a bear, like, Too Many Cooks, there are video essays on Too Many Cooks, but, like, unedited footage of the bear, you could do a video essay on that, but that was fucking disturbing. Like,
so I still haven't watched unedited footage of a bear just because it, like, knowing that it fucked you up that much makes me not want to watch it.
Well, it depends on what gets to you, though. Like, for example, jump scares. When the scare actually happens, my reaction is usually like, whoa. But, like, the build-up, I'm actually covering my eyes. Like, Mr. Ryu was relentlessly making fun of me throughout the entire Until Dawn Let's Play, because I'm like, it's gonna happen, and when it finally did, it was never that bad. It was like, oh, you got me. But meanwhile, Never Ending Nightmares scared the hell out of me. But all of my friends watching were like, yeah, dude, Lotus, it's scary, but, like, for God's sake. So, like, results may vary. Unedited footage of a bear just got under my skin, but, like, I don't know how it would affect you. There's no jump scares or, like, horror. It's not that kind of video.
I will say that watching Neverending Nightmares while you were commenting on it, like, I hate to say this, but at least for me personally, knowing you, watching a horror game with your commentary over it makes it, like, only about half as scary.
Well, I mean, that's because I'm talking calmly over the entire time.
I was like watching Corpse Party, and all I could think of was Lotus Prince all the time, like talking constantly.
Yep.
Right? It's not, well, because he's calm, collect, and doesn't really. It's like he seems to be a little bit isolated, and it kind of takes you out of immersion.
I should let's play unedited footage of Bear. Just be like, oh, here it comes. Oh, it's happening. And you're just watching this like, God damn it.
You could do the interactive fiction game on the website, right? That would be really fucked up.
I played a bit of that, and it's creepy. Yeah.
It doesn't have an ending. You just like get yourself all scared trying to understand what the hell is going on in that house.
Well, there's some creepy shit in that too. Again, there's no real jump scares. But you're just kind of like, I don't want to be here.
You told me that it was like a room you went in where you just couldn't handle the game anymore and you just closed it.
Yeah, like there's a room where like it's in the basement or something where it looks like someone's kind of buried in the room. And when I mean buried, I mean like this house is full of people. Like there's kind of fingers just sticking out of the floor, but it's not like someone dug a grave. It's like it's a concrete floor. So and like there's part of a head sticking out. You're just like, what does it mean? Like it's creepy as shit.
It's Photoshopped there. Like,
yeah, well, that's what makes it creepier. It's clearly like not real, and it has that like 90s weird texturing effect that looks crappy, but it kind of makes it creepier. It's why like Silent Hill 1 is creepy, not despite, but because of its crappy PS1 graphics.
That is something else that like helps games like Resident Evil age well, that like the enemies have kind of like this jerky motion that looks very unnatural. Yeah,
I think I mentioned this before, but I forgot if you were on the podcast at the time. But back when I was playing Attack on Titan for PS4, the first one, you know the Beast Titan? In the main missions, like Season 2 hadn't come out yet. So he was just this big like, I'm gonna get ya. He was just walking toward you with confidence, and you're like, oh man, this guy's gonna be hard. But if you play the challenge missions, a couple of them feature him, and he doesn't have a run animation, but his casual walk animation is sped up. So he's walking leisurely, but he's just kind of gaining on you, and you're like, it's creepy. I don't even know if it's supposed to be creepy, but it is.
So there was something.
No, go ahead. I don't know where I've seen similar things, but I know that like any kind of game where you just a simple like something you don't expect to be fast, it's just suddenly just the same motion, that slogging motion is sped up like
yeah. Well, even Resident Evil 1 kind of did that. There's that one zombie in the kitchen, like the one fast zombie in the game. It might be on Director's Cut. He does his like with the hands out walking, but it's just faster. Like it's not gonna catch up to you in a million years, but you're kind of like, oh, faster than I thought it would be. Like it's just creepy.
So I had a mental image a little while ago. Someone, I think it was Joe Rogan on his podcast, he was talking about Brock Lesnar and about how he trains for like his matches. And he said that Lesnar, when he trains, he can walk on his hands for a mile. And
Jesus
what I think he actually meant was that he could do exercises where he supports his upper body and like run on the ground. It's called a bear crawl. It's like a known exercise, and he can do that for a mile. But I had this like mental image of like Lesnar chasing you, and you take out his legs, but then he just like jumps on top of his hands and starts chasing you for another mile, as though he was losing no speed at all.
Ugh.
And it was just horrifying to think about.
That is nightmarish.
Just doing the tower stand.
Yeah. Well, and actually, speaking of Brock Lesnar, that's a pretty good segue for what I think you wanted to mainly talk about, because all this came from fucking 2B and Soul Calibur 6.
I know, it's almost like I intentionally tried to drive this conversation in that direction as the moderator of this podcast.
Wait, but you were going to talk about walking on hands for the next
Yes, I was going to talk about walking on hands.
Wow.
I'm just all over the place today. So, anyway, as I mentioned at the start of this podcast, or before we began, I was going to talk quite a lot about wrestling. There have been several, like, really major events in the last month or so, like, almost none of which are actually, like, a positive for the WWE. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, like, what they meant, and sort of how we got to this point, at least in terms of the wrestling business as it pertains to North America. I won't bury the lead. The first really big one completely came out of left field on Monday, which is up to Monday, the current WWE champion, and the guy who had been pegged as the face of the company and presented as such for the last like 4 or 5 years, Roman Reigns, announced that he had cancer live on Raw. nobody had any idea that this. So not only did he announce that he had cancer, he announced that it was his second bout that he had cancer. He had leukemia when he was 22, before he even came to start training as a professional wrestler. Right out of college, right before the birth of his first child, recovered very quickly, went on to have a very productive career as a wrestler, and now it was out of remission. So he was dropping the title, and we have no idea. You know, like, that's a pretty tough prognosis. Like, you expect that he will have the best possible care. You know, he's a millionaire, a star athlete, he's in fantastic shape, he's probably being monitored medically at all times, so I'm sure they caught this very early. I'm sure they are acutely aware of when he has, like, fatigue or any of the other early warning signs of cancer. So I would say he has the best possible chance of survival, but, like, it's fucking cancer. You have no idea. So, like, even if he recovers again, he might never wrestle again. He's 34 right now, I think. So that's not old. And so, like, even if he's off for like 2 or 3 years, he could easily come back and still have a productive, like, tail end to his career. There are plenty of guys who wrestled, like, the physical, not really high flying style, like the Big Show, who's, like, way bigger than him, and he's in his mid 40s and he's still wrestling, you know, once in a while. But I mean, the company has spent the last several years investing in Roman Reigns. So one thing it means is that if he does come back, he will never be a heel for, like, the rest of his life. It will be impossible to boo Roman Reigns after he comes back. I mean, of course, he could spear a 5-year-old child in the ring. We'd probably boo him. I'm sure it's possible that he could do something that would be so vile that, like, people would be willing to, like, take him as a villain. But, like, man, it will take some real work for that to happen.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't want to do it either. So, like, John Cena has the same problem. He does, like, hundreds of Make-A-Wish things, like, he goes and visits kids, and, like, so you don't want him, like, going up on the screen and then, like, peeing on somebody, or, like...
I just imagine, like, suddenly come to, like, he's a face heel, and, like, just imagine the heel with a face on it.
It's interesting terminology we use in wrestling.
Yes, I understand. Like, the heel comes from the heel turn, right?
Well, so I don't actually know where it came from. It's one of those apocryphal things that's been in use for such a long time that it's hard to tell. But I think it comes, at least how I interpret it, is that when you present a wrestling match, the faces are always the guy facing towards the camera, and the bad guys are always facing away from the camera. So you're always seeing, like, their backs and their heels.
Oh, I just assumed it was, like, similar, like, turn heel, like you turn your back to the audience or something.
So what you guys are talking about, like, John Cena made a joke about it because, like, it was at a time when people were really sick of him and they wanted him to turn heel just because he was so boring as a face. Yeah. So he's like, yeah, what do you guys want me to do? You know, a little dance in the ring, you know, a little do-si-do, a little heel turn, and then he starts like bobbing his heel back and forth, and everybody laughs at him. It's like, what an asshole.
A little do-si-do. Come on.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's John Cena. Like, he's a real weird guy.
Fun. He's having fun.
He has a lot of fun. If you've ever seen John Cena's Instagram, like, it's like Kafka-esque. It makes no sense.
That's amazing. The only thing I know about John Cena's, like, internet presence, I forgot if it was Twitter or Instagram, but he made a joke about how he was trying some new face recognition software, but it didn't work on him because, like, you know, you can't see him.
You can't see me, yes. Yeah. So recently his thing is that every week he posts, like, a different thing that starts with the letter S on top of a picture of Stone Cold Steve Austin. So, like, it was like
it's like a children's book?
It's like Stone Cold SpaghettiOs.
What? That's amazing.
Seriously, check out John Cena's Instagram. It's, like, incomprehensible. So there was one thing that, like, people thought he was having, like, a quinceañera or something. He posted, like, an image from somebody's quinceañera that said, like, 14 or 15 and, like, a little crown on it, like it was a birthday party. And it turned out he was, like, spoiling that Triple H was going to come out of retirement and win, like, that number of titles.
Jesus.
And, like, obviously, he knew this coming into, like, the event that Triple H was going to come out, but, like, nobody had any idea what he was doing, posting, like, pink number 14 with a birthday crown on it.
Yeah, that like, a quinceañera is, like,
it's like
15.
John Cena, it was a 14. It wasn't a quinceañera, but it looked like it came off of some little girl's birthday party.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, yeah, I have no idea what's going on in John Cena's brain, like when he's not
well, sometimes he takes his paychecks and staples them to his face.
That would not. I know that was a thing from Southpaw, but that would not be, like, beyond me. If you told me that John Cena did that in his spare time,
and now he's here with these amateurs.
I know that he basically won the heart of the internet by admitting that he likes anime. And I'm like, okay.
So one thing that really helped is that there was a match I think it was against CM Punk in Chicago, and like in the stands there was a guy that said like with a sign that said, "If Cena wins, we riot." And it's like Cena just like walked right up to him and took a selfie with him. And then later he was spotted at like an IHOP like a year later wearing a shirt that said, "If Cena wins, we complain on the internet."
That's amazing.
He's like ridiculously self-aware. It's great.
That's great.
He must be like a lot of fun to talk to. But like, so part of what I want to get at is that you think about John Cena and like Roman Reigns, and think about like a guy that you know who's got like mainstream penetration from the WWF, who hasn't, you know, you've got The Rock, you've got Steve Austin. Those are guys who mostly stopped wrestling like 15, 20 years ago. Like, name a guy who, besides John Cena, who was like currently wrestling for the WWE.
I mean, I'm not good at
the
this.
Big Show, of course. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. Like, anyone, you pull someone down the street, they'll probably know who Steve Austin is. They know Hulk Hogan. They might know Goldberg. You know, they know
because that's who they grew up with.
So, and this is a big deal. Like, around, you know, in 2003 or so, when The Rock tried to leave to become a Hollywood star, like, nobody thought he would actually pull it off. He got lowballed pretty severely by the WWF in their contract negotiations because they thought that he would go out to Hollywood and, like Hulk Hogan, he would just fall flat in his face and have to come crawling back to them, or, you know, just go back to professional wrestling, which he was actually good at.
John Cena could do a reboot of Santa with Muscles.
Oh my god, that would be great. He would actually be good at that role. Like,
he might actually.
Like, that's literally who he is in real life. At least how he presents himself. He just goes and visits sick kids all the time and makes their fucking day.
Yeah.
He's like literally Santa Claus, except he doesn't have the beard.
Yeah. Well, Hulk Hogan didn't either, but he made it work.
Well, I've heard that Goldberg is more like that. That like he used to like drive around and deliver like toys to children's hospitals in his spare time with the money that he made from pro wrestling. Like, he's supposed to be a great guy, like a saint,
Goldberg was actually
Santa's sleigh.
Yeah, he was evil Santa, where he just straight up horribly murdered people.
Well, you know, you are who you are in the dark, so like don't turn off the lights when Goldberg's around.
You know what was cute? You know what was cute was the post-credit scene in that movie where he has Santa's big list, you know, of naughty, and he's looking at it and he's like, "Who's next?"
Nice.
Like,
that's great because that's his catchrism, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like
So anyway,
he's the two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Right. He's naughty and nice. He's Kringle and Krampus, just like rolled into one.
Kringle and Krampus.
So anyway,
the whole movie chasing two kids. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
What I was trying to get at was that like the WWF got burned hard, and they were like really embarrassed by the thing with The Rock. Now he's just like the biggest star in Hollywood. They bet wrong, you know. So it feels now that they're trying, like the rub that the criticism they always receive is they're trying not to let anyone get bigger than the brand. It often means that a lot of the guys who seem like they're about to be successful kind of get cut off at the heels, like what Hulk Hogan used to do to other guys. But there's no Hogan around to be the top star. Like it's hard to explain without like actually showing specific examples from wrestling matches that nobody's seen. Yeah. But like I've talked to you about Braun Strowman before, right? About how he had these like fantastically popular segments. Like when Roman Reigns was in an ambulance, ironically, this was that's not funny anymore. Like, now that Reigns has cancer, but like Reigns was in an ambulance and Strowman just like tipped it over. He was obviously aided by like a forklift or something off camera, but he was like turning over cars, and they were literally trying to kill each other.
Jesus.
And Strowman had this like Reigns. He later threw Strowman into an ambulance and like crashed it into another truck. And, like, Strowman came out with, like, blood-crazed look on his face and then stumbled off into the distance like a wounded fucking animal. You know, and like, they built him up like this unstoppable, like, ruthless monster. But when it came right down to it, he still lost one-on-one to Roman Reigns. So, like, all that momentum they'd spent all this time building up, he lost to Brock Lesnar with one finisher. He lost to Roman Reigns after one finisher. Like, he beat a bunch of guys in the middle, but all that does is make him look decisively worse than the other guys at the top of the card, and it makes all those other guys look decisively worse than Braun Strowman, because he never gets that like one victorious moment where you really feel like he's a monster that you can't put down.
Yeah.
I wanted to say like hopefully when Roman Reigns was brought to a medical card with cancer, like Brock Lesnar didn't show up and turn that over to.
So it would be pretty funny if they did that. I think that it's a little
I'm not sure it won't be.
So in hindsight, you know, imagining that Roman Reigns, I mean, if they had done it on a card that he wasn't actually in, of course, if they had just like pantomimed it and used it in the storyline, they've had some weird moments like that. They did a thing where like Vince McMahon got killed in storyline in like an exploding automobile, like a car bomb. And like, so there were enough people that couldn't tell that didn't actually happen that the stock tanked like the next week, and they had to write him back on. They had to write him back onto television. There's also a thing. So he's like big. So McMahon is big, longtime friends with Donald Trump, and they did a segment where in the storyline Trump like owned the WWF. He won it from Vince McMahon, or they sold it to him, and that also caused the stock to like dive. Because people actually thought that was happening. You can't tell the difference.
Well, you know, it's funny because there's like, when I was a kid, there was that whole counterculture wrestling thing that I was a part of as well, which was like, guys, you know wrestling isn't real, right? But then I actually watched part of a match where like the Undertaker started losing a match because someone took away the urn that controls his power. I'm like, oh, okay, everyone knows this is obviously fucking acting. So like,
right.
So like the idea of I know that Trump buying the company is like more realistic than that, but like if it's a storyline thing, I don't know if you should really be actually believing it. Like,
well,
read it in the newspapers
also,
first.
I guess, just that like when in the 80s, in the 90s, like Trump was a joke, like a punchline basically, and so like he was not known for his business acumen. So to think that he was actually going to become a leader of the company, or even like an on-screen storyline character, was like a little bit worrisome. So maybe that had something to do with it.
I guess, but it's just kind of funny that like, I mean, today it's like you immediately go to like some news website and see if they're reporting it. But back then, I guess if it wasn't in today's newspaper, then you have to wait for tomorrow to find out if it's real or something, or maybe it was on TV and you don't know if they're going to report about it. So I guess there's less access to figuring it out. But
yeah, I don't think there's really an excuse for like taking what is shown on actual filmed WWF television seriously. Like if something bad
it
actually
is
happens,
a TV show at the end of the day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, like the idea of Vince McMahon dying in a car bomb, like, that's fucking murder. Like, you wouldn't think they would show it so cavalierly on WWF, right? It's like, oh, I guess he's dead. Like, and they're like, you would think they would treat that with more gravity than they probably did, because it obviously wasn't real.
So that was the thing. So continue. Go ahead.
I wanted to say that did the explosion throw little bits of the championship belt apart, and then the fire melted the championship belt pieces, and they pulled together and came out from it like the T-1000.
Man,
I'm thinking like Jason X, where he comes out like fused with the belt. He like the belt's part of his body now, like on his waist. Nobody watched Jason X.
All of these things are cooler than what actually happened, which is just that they didn't mention it after the episode ends.
I still think the coolest thing that actually happened was when the $1 Million Man went to an incredibly famous real jewelry store and bought like a belt made like studded entirely with diamonds and gold. Like, I think the belt wasn't real, but it was supposed to be like, well, I have a better belt that I bought and didn't earn, and it's like this insanely expensive belt. It's like, whatever, dude.
So
it's going to be very uncomfortable to wear.
Probably. Mm-hmm. I just love that he walks into the jewelry store with a fucking cape, and he just goes like, ha 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 ha, when he walks in, like, who the hell are you?
So actually, $1 Million Man's son, he like actually tried to become a professional wrestler, and he was just not that great at it.
Is he like $100,000 man?
No, he was just Ted DiBiase Jr. Like,
okay,
that was all. He had no personality. I'm very upset about that, because it was a good excuse to have his dad back on television. DiBiase Sr., I think he opened like a ministry or something, so he's like way off of wrestling right now, but he loves to come back and play the character.
That does sound familiar. I think I heard about that, because I remember he was actually at like, maybe it was RetroCon or whatever, the same venue that has too many games. Like, so he was just kind of there doing autographs, which is amusing. He was just in New Jersey, or I guess Pennsylvania.
Anyway, so a little bit back to the topic at hand. So the issue that I'm trying to get at is that the WWF is not great right now at creating stars, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that they want the brand to be large, and they don't need necessarily, at least in the short term, to create stars, because they're being paid unbelievable amounts of money to produce television for Fox. They got this contract. Basically SmackDown got picked up by Fox Sports. It's like $1 billion contract. It's substantially more money than than anyone going into the deal thought that the WWF was actually worth. It caused the stock to skyrocket, which usually means that the move was completely unexpected. What that means is that it doesn't really matter for the next couple of years how good the television is. They have this like $1 billion guaranteed contract. It's actually more money than they'll usually make from pay-per-view buys or from subscriptions to the network. So that means they don't even really have an incentive anymore to make good main events for their pay-per-view broadcasts per se, because that's just not their primary like motivator of their profits. And it's like a little bit troublesome because like why am I excited to watch any of these matches? To know that like all of these guys are now replaceable. You know, if one of them doesn't work out, they're just going to toss them. They're not going to give them like a second chance. They're just going to wind up wallowing in the mid card, and that's very frustrating. But like storylines can stop and start with no sense. It feels a lot like WCW, like when that was kind of circling the toilet. Like they were running their company with Ted Turner's billions because he felt like he owed that money to what used to be the NWA and like I can't remember the name of the company, Jim Crockett's Promotions I think it was, before it became WCW. That they had like infinite money to work with. They could sign away all the big stars. They got Hulk Hogan, you know, they got Macho Man, they had Sting, they had Goldberg. Obviously not all these guys came from WWF, but they had like all of the old talent. They had Ric Flair. And they could afford to pay them these absurd contracts. But they didn't need to make new talent, they felt, because they could just buy anyone they wanted. So they never really felt compelled to make good television. And of course Hogan, you know, he sucks all the oxygen out of the room. He's a notorious politicker who like keeps all the other up-and-coming wrestlers down. And the business model wound up failing. It took years for it to happen, but they went out of business. It was not sustainable. After Hogan got too old to actually be a marketable star, they went out of business. So I have some concerns about where this is going. Yep. Okay.
I wanted to say like I'm waiting for the point where this Hulk Hogan ends up the same way like Ric Flair, like he just does a body slam and all of his bones are just powderized. The other thing I wanted to say that so like maybe they really should have invested in raising new stars just for safety's sake, because like I don't know, like what I heard, like professional wrestlers don't like they burn through their own life a little bit too fast. Like the stardom life and the athletic life does not like mixes poorly. Like
so
it's stress, substance abuse, stuff like that. It kind of sucks the life side of you.
I would say that's the case. That's why a lot of wrestlers from the 70s and 80s and 90s like passed away in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. It's actually kind of amazing that Hulk Hogan is still alive. You know, if you watch him backstage or giving his promos in the 80s, it felt like he was constantly on cocaine. And he was obviously on steroids. And like the Ultimate Warrior was in the same like stuff, and he died at 51, like right after getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. He just went to the plane to go back home, and he collapsed on the runway and died. The Macho Man had the same thing happen to him. He had a heart attack in his car at 50-something, 58 I think it was. So like Hogan's still alive. He's not wrestling anymore. He's kind of a non-person to WWF because he had this like sex tape leaked a few years ago. Where
it's just the Gawker thing?
Yeah, he went on like this race. He went on like this racist rant on top of it too, in the middle of the sex tape. It was not. It's not possible for like a more damaging sex tape to have been released unless he was like having sex with children. Like it was that bad.
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, you know, I think we've gotten this situation cleared, and then this happens. It's like, oh, okay. Like, it's like that episode of The Simpsons where Bart stole from the toy store, where he like runs in front of the security camera footage, like, Mom, I don't think you want to see this, but he's standing in front of one of like 1,000 monitors. It's like, I
want to say like in that event nobody won.
Yeah,
I would say that's the case. Yes, but so to circle back a little bit, on top of the Fox Sports contract, yeah, I've mentioned this before. They're also getting like phenomenal amounts of money to run shows in Saudi Arabia, like hundreds of millions of dollars, which has its own set of problems. And because of the thing with the journalist who was murdered in Turkey, you know, it was speculated that they actually have a show coming up in November. Like their second of these major Saudi Arabia shows, and it was speculated that they would be forced to pull out for diplomatic reasons, which means they forfeit the hundreds of millions of dollars that they would have been receiving to run these shows in the first place. Well, you know, obviously that's far from the biggest concern right now. You know, we have like real issues. Like like political issues that are bigger than the scope of this podcast to get into right now.
Pretty much.
But so it also means the show that even abstracting all of that away for a little bit, the shows are driven by what the Saudi Arabian prince who's funding it wants to see. So the first time that they ran the show, he asked for like a whole bunch of guys from the 80s, like The Undertaker, who is like 53 and barely wrestles. He asked for Yokozuna, who's dead. He asked for the Ultimate Warrior, who's dead. Like,
yep.
I hope he was not severely disappointed with the live wrestlers they actually brought to the show. It seemed like the people in attendance had a fantastic time. But for this next show, there's a rumor that they're going to pay to have Hulk Hogan come, and like, boy, that would be a real like middle finger to the American audiences who really don't fucking want to see Hulk Hogan at all anymore. Yeah. Like, if they're willing to have him come out there and like be the guy. So the first time they went out there, they had John Cena. They paid John Cena to come out and deliver a promo about how quote unquote progressive Saudi Arabia was. And that was like, it was kind of gross to listen to. It had this like kind of slimy feel to it. And this year, so this one, Cena has refused to go to.
Oh, wow.
So, like I said, he's the last guy I feel WWF has produced who is a bigger star than the brand. So he's like the only guy on the roster who I feel has the clout to say that he doesn't want to go and just to refuse. So, imagine if they paid Hulk Hogan to do what John Cena did the last time, to give that speech and cut that promo about how happy he was to be there in Riyadh, in front of the Saudi Arabian crowd, and how hopeful he was for their future together. It's part of some initiative that Saudi Arabia has. About diplomacy for the next 10 years. That's why they're funding this with so much money. They're also doing a match, Kane and The Undertaker versus Triple H and Shawn Michaels. So if those guys sound familiar, on The Undertaker, of course, he was like 53 during the first one. Now he's only getting older. He can't wrestle anymore. He only comes out for these special events. His matches are only like 5 minutes. Kane is also not an active wrestler. He's the fucking mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee. Like,
that's
he is not a wrestler.
so out there.
Shawn Michaels was retired by The Undertaker.
Kane is a real-life Mike Hagar now. He's like the mayor who goes out and just fucking beats people up.
He's a real-life Jesse the Body Ventura, who was also a person in real life.
Yes.
Wasn't Jesse Ventura like the governor of, like... Oh, where was it? Or didn't he run for governor?
He was the governor of Minnesota.
Okay, you know what it was? Because I remember that the movie Predator was like a cavalcade of governors-to-be, which is fucking weird. Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger became the governor of California, Jesse Ventura, and then the guy who played Billy, like the strong silent guy, he, I think, ran for governor of Kentucky. It's like, what? That's so out there.
Nice. So the reason this all ties back into Roman Reigns is because there's this lineage that was tied into The Undertaker's streak. So the big thing, Dracologist, about The Undertaker was that he used to wrestle every year at WrestleMania, and he never lost. He went for, like, I think it was 21-0 before he finally lost, and there was a lot of history tied up in that streak. So Ric Flair, who most people regard as the greatest North American wrestler of all time, was retired at WrestleMania 24 by Shawn Michaels. Ric Flair was 58, and he felt like he could barely wrestle. Retirement matches are almost never good. They're usually, one guy who is like at the tail end of his physical like lifespan, and like Ric Flair, he couldn't do any of his signature spots anymore. Like, he could barely just brawl. It was real ugly.
Old.
Yeah, but it was very poignant, and it ends with this like incredible sequence where Shawn Michaels like Flair can barely do anything anymore. He can barely stand up, but he does the like come here gesture. And you can see, they don't have him mic'd up, but you can see Shawn Michaels mouth the words like, "I'm sorry, I love you," and then just like kicks the shit out of him and pins him.
Oh, wow.
And I tear up a little bit seeing that, because that's like, I cannot imagine what that was like for Michaels to like have to end the career of a legend, in the ring in front of like 50,000
and he was probably
people.
like one of his idols too. It would feel weird if you had to, like, even in terms of acting, like kick the ass of, or like in a movie, like kill like some actor that you've been looking up to. Like, I mean, I can think of a couple examples, but obviously those would be spoilers, so let's not do that. But
I wouldn't say like kill it in the movie, but like just getting the roll call instead of him.
Right. So
like,
I mean,
like,
yeah. No, go ahead.
You're literally sending off someone you liked.
So, like, just to put this a little bit in perspective, Michaels is one of those guys who was on the road to becoming another Ultimate Warrior. Like, he was fired by the WWF for drug problems. He broke his back in a match with The Undertaker. And we thought that he would never come back, but he did. He came back for a short run, 4 or 5 years. He thought he would never wrestle Ric Flair again, because Flair went off to WCW, and we had no idea that they were going to go out of business. So he had this chance to like team up with to work with Ric Flair for a little while and retire him, and that storyline played into 2 WrestleManias later when Shawn Michaels was retired in the prime of his career. He probably had like 4 or 5 more good years left on his before he would have declined the same way Flair did. He was retired by The Undertaker. He went on top. It was like one of the best matches the WWF has ever put on. It ended WrestleMania 26. It was the main event. It was, I think, 18-0 or 19-0 for The Undertaker. And so the Undertaker streak, he basically carried that torch. He carried the torch of Shawn Michaels, who was like one of the best in-ring performers the WWF ever had. Carried the torch of Ric Flair's retirement, who was one of the best wrestlers in the history of the sport. And then after that, he ended Triple H's in-ring career. So Triple H still wrestles, but they had this match 2 years later called End of an Era, which was a Triple H versus Undertaker, one of those Hell in a Cell matches where they're in the steel cage, and Shawn Michaels was the referee, and it was supposed to be the close of the Attitude Era, basically. They were the last guys who were still like top stars who were wrestling, and it ended all of their full-time careers.
At this point, like I think like the Undertaker's urn is filled with the other wrestlers' hopes and dreams.
Yeah,
career.
So like the Undertaker at WrestleMania was almost like a different character than the Undertaker like the rest of the year. So like he stopped wrestling. That was also the end of his full-time career because there's just nothing that he could do the rest of the year that was as special as coming out once a year at WrestleMania and doing this streak match. So a couple of years later, they gave the streak to Brock Lesnar. They had Lesnar win, and it like sucked all the air out of the stadium. But if you stopped and thought about it, like Lesnar was the only guy who had like the star power left over. I mean, The Rock could have come back, but he doesn't usually wrestle because it's bad for his insurance policies, like with the Hollywood films that he does these days. So he doesn't come back very often, and he doesn't do any in-ring action. But like he's the only guy who's like young enough and like still has the aura of that era who could carry this torch, you know, from Flair to Michaels to The Undertaker, and now Lesnar has it. And Roman Reigns was the guy who was groomed to take it from Lesnar. Sort of why people, at the end of the day... so, you know, Roman Reigns, he in principle retired The Undertaker. It was The Undertaker's last, like, real wrestling match. Everything since then has just been, like, a 2-minute squash. Like, the aura has, like, totally disappeared from his character. He also was, like, the only guy after The Undertaker lost his streak to beat Brock Lesnar. He was the guy who was supposed to carry all of his history. And now it feels like they dropped the Olympic torch, like it went out or something. Like the fact that he can't wrestle anymore, I don't even know what they can do. All that heat is gone. It's just dissipated. It's so frustrating to talk about, like from a historical perspective, that there's just nobody left in the WWF who has that kind of
Like when the torchbearer was suddenly shot in the foot, like
basically yes.
Like, the guy who's supposed to carry on everything suddenly collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sucks. I can understand why this vexes people.
So there's a lot of great guys wrestling right now who could become like that good. You know, they emergency turned a couple of people face at the episode of Raw where Roman Reigns announced that he had leukemia, because it seemed like, as far as I've heard, nobody had any idea this happened until like 2 or 3 days before the episode was supposed to air. So like this really came out of left field. But like at the same time, sort of everything is revolving around preparing for the Saudi Arabia show, where they really don't care at all about any of the continuing storylines. They just want to see like all these guys from the 80s that they're paying a lot of money for in the 90s. They want to see John Cena. They want to see Randy Orton. I guess they're not quite as good as Hulk Hogan and Yokozuna, but you know, what are you gonna do? Like, so on top of that,
use sprites from an old video game. Like just project it onto the screens.
So one last thing, and actually this is probably the most important. I want to spend maybe 5 minutes on this. Is that at the Saudi Arabia show, the women are not allowed to wrestle. I know I brought this up before, and it's like tremendously problematic by itself.
Yeah.
What they did was the WWF has tried very hard after spending decades ruining women's wrestling in North America. Like seriously, they have tried to put as much as they can be bothered to support to like revitalize the state of their own women's division. So over the last couple of years, they've gone and they've tried to push some of the women as legitimate wrestlers again, instead of just like eye candy or like valets. You know, like it used to be in the Attitude Era that the women's championship would be like literally like a strip match or a mud wrestling match. Like the goal would often be just like pull off your opponent's clothes, and if you did that, you were the new champion. It was just like garbage wrestling for you know, neckbeards. And so they hired a trainer down in NXT, the developmental league, and she has done a fantastic job recruiting talent. They did like this worldwide recruiting spree. They ran a tournament this summer and last summer called the Mae Young Classic, where they brought in women from all over the world so they could have basically a tryout on the network to see like who could cut it on television, basically. And they've gotten a lot of like potential stars out of that. The biggest of which was probably Ric Flair's daughter, Charlotte. Of course, they also got Ronda Rousey out of MMA, she's lost a little luster now that she got the crap kicked out of her twice, you know, and she had to retire from UFC. But she has been like a revelation. She's like Lesnar or Kurt Angle or like some of these other guys who became like luminary wrestlers after competing in a major sport. Like she's been great. The only issue I think has been, well, I mean, for one, her history is not like perfect. Like if you read her autobiography and listen to some of her interviews, she's like, she's an oddball. That's putting it nicely. So she's like a Sandy Hook truther, Lotus, if that's like, you know, if that rings a bell to you at all.
Yeah, that would be a problem.
Yeah, I don't like. There are some oddball beliefs. They don't often surface very much because we don't expect professional athletes to give. You know, we don't expect them to have well-informed social opinions, so we don't usually ask them for their opinion on things. You know, but sometimes you'll really get surprised by an absolute fucking Pandora's box of like shitty opinions about things.
Yeah.
And this is one of those cases. Like supposedly MMA is full of it. Like they all go on Joe Rogan's podcast and they just like run their mouths. Like it's unbelievable. So that could be a real black eye. But otherwise, like, since she's such a legitimate MMA fighter, it feels like none of the women who are wrestling, who are just like regular wrestlers, mostly like coming from a fitness model background, have like any chance whatsoever of actually beating her in a wrestling match, even a fake WWF match, right? Like you look at her.
Those people around like good and proper.
Yeah, exactly. Like Lesnar had kind of the same thing. It was almost like when you watch someone try to do like a fake wrestling move to him, it looked like it wouldn't hurt him even if they did it real, and he was just so big and nasty that he couldn't tell the difference.
Well, that's the thing. Brock Lesnar's like 1,000 feet tall. Like there's, I mean, like you can only suspend your belief so much.
Like Lesnar is literally
Lotus. I think the terminology is brick shit house.
Yeah, right.
So the I think it's the Beast Titan or the Armored Titan is like literally based off of Brock Lesnar. Like,
are you serious?
Yes, one of the Titans in Attack on Titan is actually based off of Brock Lesnar.
That's amazing.
Lol.
That's
so he's
awful.
Like the real version of that. Like, can you imagine like Lesnar like looking over the wall? Like he's gonna kick your shit in.
Yeah, I mean, regarding what we were talking about earlier of things suddenly moving fast, I remember early episodes in Season 1 of Attack on Titan really got me because the Titans were scary because they were shambling monsters, but then one of them decides to run, and you're like, of course they could run, I just didn't really think about it. Or like when someone's like floating above one of the Titans and they do a little leap and bite their leg off, I'm like, oh, they can jump. Like, I guess I should have thought about that, but I really didn't, so this mundane action is fucking terrifying. That's
why Lesnar is so like terrifying. Like all he does is like do some basic throws and like kicks and like some basic wrestling holds, and it just looks like nobody has figured out that this is actually how you're supposed to win a wrestling match. That like he's cracked the code.
Well, it's like the fight in The Princess Bride, right? Where Carrie Elwes as the Man in Black was attacking Andre the Giant, where Andre just stands there and Carrie Elwes just like shoulder tackles him and nothing happens because he's fucking Andre the Giant. It's like, well, like, okay.
So Rousey has kind of the same problem. Not that this is necessarily a bad thing in short bursts, but it makes it very difficult for the. And so she is part of an MMA troupe called the Four Horsemen. They were all best friends. They all hang out together. I think it's like Shayna Baszler, Jessamine Duke, and I can't remember the Marina Shafir. And so they're all in the WWF system, and it feels like they're building to something at Survivor Series where they're going to take on some like other women, but like some of the actual professional wrestler women. But like how would you ever believe that's going to be a fair fight? Maybe if there are like 10 of the other women and they all are allowed to go 10-on-1 against the 4 of them, then maybe it would be believable. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Like it's tough. But like what they're trying to build to is that to sort of be the companion to these Saudi Arabia shows, they actually published this last Sunday a show called Evolution, which was their first women's only pay-per-view, and they stacked that card top to bottom. They put matches on that card that would normally be the main event of other pay-per-views that they also issue during the year. Like I said, they had that tournament, the Mae Young Classic, that would like normally get its own special, but instead they put the finals in the middle of this pay-per-view. They had like both of the regular women's titles. They had a big battle royal where they had a whole bunch of like historical women's wrestlers going all the way back to the 80s. That was a lot of fun. They brought out of retirement Trish Stratus and Lita, who were the 2 most famous women's wrestlers from the 90s, from the Attitude Era, who were sort of really well known for taking it very seriously, and despite like being like major fitness models, they actually like really put in the work to become very good professional wrestlers. They both won the women's title in WWF like 5, 6, 7 times each. So they came out of retirement to do a tag team match, basically, in their early 40s, which would usually be around the age that a wrestler would be sort of tailing off their career. But for the women, they've been like, from Vince McMahon's standpoint, like once you hit like 30, like you're done. So unfortunately, like I'm glad that they're recognizing that these women still have value to the company and that people are still willing to come see them and like be excited about their matches, because that crowd was hot. They were very excited to watch this pay-per-view, and because the card was so stacked and it didn't have like the usual WWF problem where they put like 11 matches in 4 hours and a lot of them are just garbage filler, like every match had real value. It's probably the best pay-per-view they put on all years. It was like, just in terms of entertainment per hour, it wasn't as big as WrestleMania, but like from start to finish, it was probably like one of the best shows they put on this year. And it's unfortunate, like, so they advertised Crown Jewel, which is the Saudi Arabia show, and like the fans, they booed the shit out of that because they knew exactly what that meant. Like you're gonna advertise a show where the women are literally banned from the country, like on a women's only pay-per-view. But it tells you like where the money is, and like at the end of the day, no matter how much they say they're being supportive of the women, like this is what they're getting all the money to produce. They're getting hundreds of millions of dollars to give these shows and promote these shows, you know, and we can never forget that. Like it's always going to be hanging over, and it's going to suck all the air out of the room. You know, whenever the women are in the ring, like it feels like they have to give up time. Like we have to devote promo segments to Shawn Michaels and Triple H, who should be enjoying a healthy retirement, instead coming out to be paid like $2 million each to put on a 10-minute match in front of a Saudi Arabian prince on the episode of Raw this week. Every week, either The Undertaker comes out and they film a promo, which I'm sure the residents of Knoxville, Tennessee are very happy about. Their tax dollars are paying for Kane to fucking fly out here and put his red mask on.
Yeah, right.
and be I'm sure Jesse Ventura did the same thing when he was the governor of Minnesota, and Arnold Schwarzenegger did the same thing. He was in WWF ring a few times when he was governor of California. They didn't do any matches, but they were like wasting time. They didn't do anything to promote the states they were supposed to be governing. But they came out and took to take the paycheck and be the governor and be Jesse the Body.
Well, OldManStompy, let's call it bread and circus.
Yes, I was at the end of the day, like I said, it's
in America case, it's popcorn and wrestling.
Yes, it's hot dogs and popcorn and cheap sodas and cheap beer.
And muscly bodies slamming onto each other.
Yes, and occasionally now muscly women body slamming each other.
Oh, that's cool.
So
I wanted to say like that. Sorry.
No. Continue. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say like just dress them up like D&D barbarian women, and let them have at each other.
I mean, you say this like they don't already do that. Like,
I was gonna say that sounds like something they would have done like in the 80s and 90s.
Charlotte is like probably the biggest homemade star they have, and all of her outfits are styled after Ric Flair's outfits, which it's pretty obvious. Like it makes the most sense. I am like relatively happy that they've allowed Charlotte to be the inheritor of Ric Flair's legacy. Like it kind of feels like he hasn't entirely left. It's pretty nice. She's great at that role. Like Ric Flair was kind of an asshole most of the time. He like.
No, I don't.
Well, yeah. So he was one of the original like Hollywood heels. He was he was one of those guys where like he said like all the men wanted to be me, all the women wanted to be with me. But at the same time, he was the Hollywood kind of guy, so he was a little bit like effeminate, which made it really easy to see him like you want to get the crap kicked out of him by the Macho Man or something, right? So like that's an old heel style going all the way back to like Gorgeous George in the 1950s. It's like he threatened the sexuality of both the men and the women in the ring. Charlotte does not have this problem, or at least she didn't carry on that particular aspect of the character. But like Ric Flair, he was known as the dirtiest player in the game. A lot of his famous moves are actual like cheap shots or like ingenious setups for cheap shots, and like Charlotte's kind of picked that up a little bit. She wrestles in his style, and she has like his signature finishing move. It's pretty great. They did a segment in her match, which was the match of the night. She wrestled this woman Becky Lynch, who's she's kind of like got a steampunk aesthetic. They had what's called a last woman standing match, which is the kind of match that usually I hate in WWF. What it means is the winner is the person who can keep the other one down to a count of 10. And usually that means like every time you do a big finishing move, like the whole match grinds to a halt because the referee has to start counting to 10 instead of just like the 1, 2, 3 and it's over. So it means the match usually takes fucking forever. But they set up some really great spots around it. They ended one where Lynch, she like drove Charlotte through the announcer table, which is always a great spot. It happens once at every pay-per-view. Like someone goes through the Spanish announcers table. So of course they had to do it here, and then Lynch just like threw a whole bunch of shit on top of her, like all the announcers' chairs, like all the tables, like the ring bell, like one of the cameramen just like tossed it all on top of her. And so, like, the ref starts doing the count to 10, and at, like, 9, Charlotte just comes, like, bursting out of the pile of shit like she's about to kill somebody with, like, blood, it's like, this, like crazed look on her face. And Lynch looked like she's seen a fucking ghost, and she, like, picks up her title and she runs into the stands. Like, she has to get out of there now. So, yeah, that was great. I thought it was a great match. They didn't rely too much on the count to 10. Charlotte actually lost. So Becky Lynch will get to keep the title. She's another person to watch out for. She's kind of got this like she's trying to keep up this sort of Stone Cold Steve Austin vibe. Not that she's as charismatic as Austin, like or as much of a wife beater. But we'll see where that goes. So I'll probably revisit her role in the company at a later date. But I think that's everything I wanted to touch on. Do you guys have any final thoughts? I know wrestling usually is my kind of thing, and like I tend to really dominate the conversation. But if you had any passing thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them.
I think I'm good.
That sounds like.
I'm just hoping that they find new blood to form more body slams.
Yeah.
it takes a mother wrestler and a father wrestler to produce a baby body slam, I guess. Like. Well, anyway. So, let me find my script. That's our show for this week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes or on Dave Belcher's Podcast Observer Network newsletter. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Thursday for our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the podcast where we explore the inanity of pop culture. Finally, you can friend me as OldManStompy on most major social media and gaming networks except for Steam, where I pretend for. Well, right now I'm playing Hollow Knight, so just don't bother me. And you can
right.
friend, and you can friend our non-existent host in Vice the Bold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, Twitter, Battle.net, and I guess just shout into the nameless void, and perhaps he will hear you.
Yeah, the void in which he has been just taken away.
The void beyond time.
Yes, beyond time and space. You can find me at my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you're interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, or getting in on a Discord chat with me and other patrons, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
And you can find me on Skype, Steam, and of course on the Lair of the Crocodile Squirrel Discord channel.
Nice. And I guess we'll have a link to that probably in the video somewhere, or in the video description.
Probably.
In the future. So, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on Thursday. Cheers.
Until next time, everyone, have a happy Halloween!
Ooh, goodbye.